A British Member of Parliament has been stabbed to death in a church hall during his regular consultation with constituents. Sir David Amess was attacked on Leon Sea, east of London. Police have arrested a 25-year-old suspect. A series of suicide bomb blasts have killed more than 40 people at a mosque in the Afghan city of Kandahar. Dozens of others were injured. The mosque is used by the minority Shia Muslim community. The United States has announced that it will reopen its borders on November the 8th to all foreign travellers who have been fully vaccinated against coronavirus. The British singer Adele has released her latest single after a 6-year wait. The Grammy-winning pop star has been teasing the song for several weeks, but it's been heard in full for the first time today.
In Afghanistan, a suicide bomb attack on worshippers at a Muslim religious center in Kandahar kills 47 people and injures 70. Japan's new Prime Minister Fumio Kishida speaks with South Korean President Moon Jae-in by telephone in an effort to increase security ties hurt by tense relations. In Cameroon, defense officials say a mob hanged a military policeman accused of killing a 5-year-old girl when he fired on a car in Buea. And in Taiwan, President Tsai Ing-wen promises to assist families of victims of a fire that killed 46 people.
I'm Carl Azus. First story today. The U.S. government says it's made progress in an effort to relieve some of the shipping problems that have clogged up the international supply chain. The government does not control that chain. It's largely made up of private port operators, trucking companies, railroads, and warehouses. But the Biden administration is putting its support behind a plan for the Port of Los Angeles to operate 24/7 and for large companies like Walmart, Home Depot, and UPS to ship more goods at night. California's Port of Los Angeles is one of the most congested ports on Earth. 40% of all the containers shipped to America come through here and at the Port of Long Beach. Economic analysts and trade leaders take some serious time, money, and enthusiasm to build a life-sized X-Wing. But for some die-hard Star Wars fans in Russia, it was challenge accepted. The builders say it took several months to construct, and that in terms of the money they spent, it was, quote, a lot. The cost was $5,000, according to the news site Interesting Engineering. The X-Wing replica is made mostly of wood and doesn't actually fly. In fact, the Starfighter doesn't actually fight stars. Its pilot doesn't actually walk skies. It's nowhere near a galaxy far, far away, and it took more than Obi-Wan builder, though it wasn't exactly a Rebel Alliance. Still, when it comes to the question of do or do not, Jedi gotta say the finished X-Wing makes for one great Mandalorian. Cannon City High School, shout out to you, our viewers in Cannon City, Colorado. We get a lot of requests for that, but the one place we look for the schools we mention is youtube.com/CNN10. Have a great weekend, everyone.
We begin with reports of a large explosion at a Shiite mosque in the southern Afghan city of Kandahar on Friday afternoon. A local hospital says that so far 32 people have been killed with 53 injured. The mosque was busy with Friday services at the time. Afghanistan's Interior Ministry says it has sent troops to the scene to launch an investigation. Just last week, an explosion occurred at another mosque in the northern city of Kunduz, leaving more than 40 people dead. The Islamic State militant group claimed responsibility for that attack. It's been 2 months since the Taliban took control of the country, but tensions remain high amid the continuing violence. Moving on to Japan, where officials are hurrying to prepare for the upcoming election, a day after the lower house of the Diet was dissolved. Party leaders are gearing up to hit the campaign trail ahead of the October 31st vote. Official campaigning starts next Tuesday. Preparations are underway across the country. In the western prefecture of Shimane, electoral officials readied their so-called 7 election tools. Candidates and their staff are required to carry armbands, flags, and other items to signal their official status while campaigning. Party leaders are already in battle mode. The Secretary General of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party pledged to win the election to maintain Prime Minister Kishida Fumio's administration.
This election is for voters to choose a political system and a government. The choice is between the coalition of our Liberal Democratic Party and Komeito and the opposition tie-up of the Constitutional Democratic Party and the Communist Party. We will do our best to protect freedom and democracy.
The leader of the largest opposition Constitutional Democratic Party says the country needs a change of government.
We have repeatedly presented proposals to rebuild people's lives and the economy for nearly 2 years. That's something the LDP and Prime Minister Kishida cannot do. Please let us lead the country.
Voters will choose 465 members of the lower house at the end of this month. 2 Russian deputy prime ministers have visited one of 4 Russian-held islands claimed by Japan. Their trip followed President Vladimir Putin's announcement last month of a plan to establish a tariff-free zone in the islands. Dmitry Grigorenko and Marat Husnulin arrived at Etorofu Island on Friday. The Russian government says their purpose is to inspect facilities that will install new government-funded equipment. Putin hopes to attract foreign investment to what Russia calls the Kuril Islands. They include 4 islands that Japan claims as its northern territories. Grigorenko said on Thursday the special preferential zone will be launched as early as January 2023. Japan's top government spokesperson said the government has lodged a protest with Russia.
The visit runs counter to our consistent position on the Northern Territories and is unacceptable.
The Japanese government maintains that the islands are an inherent part of Japan's territory. It says the islands were illegally occupied after World War II. Businesses are slowly returning to normal after Japan's state of emergency was lifted. The western prefectures of Hiroshima and Fukuoka have ended requests for restaurants and bars serving alcohol to shorten their hours. Authorities had asked them to close early and limit alcohol service to prevent coronavirus infections. That continued even after the state of emergency was lifted at the end of last month. People had mixed reactions.
I felt sad when I saw the city closed and dark. I hope this will cheer up the city.
People may get too active too soon. I'm a bit worried.
Municipalities are calling on residents to complete their coronavirus inoculations soon. All vaccines approved in Japan require 2 shots for maximum immunity. But about 11 million of those who had received their first doses as of Wednesday had yet to receive a second. One expert says studies suggest that being fully vaccinated can reduce the virus's effects by 90%.
The second dose will ensure higher protection, even for people who get it past the recommended interval. Everyone should be fully vaccinated to be prepared for future outbreaks.
Parts of Japan are scaling down their coronavirus vaccination programs. The government plans to finish inoculating all eligible people who want the shots by November. Japanese Prime Minister Kishida Fumio says the government will draw up a plan by early November to prevent another surge in COVID cases. The government's coronavirus task force outlined the measures at a meeting on Friday.
Taking lessons from this summer's peak of infections, we are drawing up measures that we can take even if another highly transmissible variant will appear in the future. We will work with prefectural governments to draw up a plan that includes securing necessary hospital beds.
The Prime Minister told the meeting he wants to further prevent infections by fully utilizing vaccines, doing more testing, and providing more drugs for treatment. He also wants to make sure patients are treated in earlier stages of infections. Kishida says if there is another outbreak, the government will respond quickly and urge people to follow restrictions. He added the government could limit medical services in order to expand the number of beds available for coronavirus patients. The Prime Minister also says by the end of this year, the government will seek approval of a drug for patients with mild symptoms. The drug is now under clinical study. Kishida says the government will coordinate its plans with local governments later this month. Turning to South Korea, where the government says it'll ease some coronavirus restrictions next week as more people get their shots. More than 60% of the country's population is now fully vaccinated. The number of daily infections topped 3,000 in September, hitting a record for South Korea. But the government says severe cases and deaths are declining. The government says it'll allow nighttime private gatherings in Greater Seoul of up to 8 people if at least half of them have their shots. It'll also allow limited numbers of fully vaccinated people to attend sports events. They're currently being held without spectators. The government plans to review its antivirus measures with the aim of returning to a more normal daily life. But health authorities warned that Britain and Israel saw cases rise after they loosened restrictions. They urged people to continue following anti-infection measures. The Australian city of Sydney will allow fully vaccinated Australian citizens from overseas to enter without the need to quarantine. The easing of entry controls will start from November 1st. The Premier of New South Wales State issued the announcement on Friday, citing progress in vaccinations.
For the double vaccinated people right around the world, Sydney, New South Wales is open for business. We want people back. We're leading the nation out of this pandemic. A hotel quarantine, home quarantine is a thing of the past.
Australia has been restricting international travel since March 2020 in response to the pandemic. Sydney bars and restaurants were allowed this week to resume service indoors for the first time in 3.5 months. The state government aims to gradually restart economic activities and international travel to help rebuild the pandemic-hit region. Meanwhile, India has resumed COVID vaccine exports for the first time in about 6 months. An External Affairs Ministry spokesperson said vaccines have been sent to Nepal, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Iran. India was a major vaccine supplier to other countries, but it stopped exports in April after domestic infections soared. Daily cases in May peaked at more than 400,000. Infections since then have plunged. India says it'll provide vaccines to help in the global fight against COVID-19. The maritime exercise of the Quad countries concluded Friday. The Quad includes the U.S., India, Australia, and Japan. NHK World's Abhishek Dulia has more from New Delhi.
The second phase of the naval drills started Tuesday in waters of India. It was more comprehensive than the first phase held in August. In the first phase, the countries developed coordination and interoperability. The latest drills focused on anti-submarine warfare exercises and weapons firing. The Quad is an effort to enhance cooperation in different spheres to counter China's growing military presence in the region. The exercises highlight their commitment to a rules-based international order and an open Indo-Pacific. The national interests of the 4 countries have received a fresh momentum since the Quad leaders held the first in-person meeting in September. Beijing doubts the feasibility of the exercises as the Quad countries try to contain China's growing influence. But the emergence of the AUKUS security pact between Australia, the UK and the US is seen as an attempt to send a stronger message to China. New Delhi is watching AUKUS from the sidelines. India is seeking ways to strengthen regional cooperation to counter China's hegemony. Abhishek Dulia, NHK World, New Delhi.
Flooding rains have poured into parts of Greece, causing problems for people in Athens and prompting evacuations in other places. Our meteorologist Saika Mori has more in world weather.
Hello there. A storm called Balas hit parts of Greece on Thursday. We saw 343